We're talking about some of the scariest Wikipedia pages, and there, Wikipedia's got everything, right?
Yeah. So stay tuned to find something you like.
Let's get into
or
it.
don't.
We're starting off the list with the Mummies of Guanajuato Wikipedia page. So, mummies are freaky at the best of times. I mean, they're somewhat well-preserved corpses. Kind of crazy now thinking about you just have mummies displayed in museums and people just walk up and like press their faces into the glass and they're just staring at a dead corpse. In Guanajuato, Mexico, you'll find the Museum of the Mummies, which houses over 100 eerily well-preserved mummies, about 60 of which are on display. Now, these mummies had at one time been buried, but between 1870 and 1958, there had been a tax in place that families were required to pay in order for a loved one to stay in the ground. If they couldn't pay, the body was disinterred, and the ones in the best condition were stored in a nearby building, the building which is now the museum. The creepiest part about these mummies, though, is that most of them look like they're screaming. But why? Well, between 1829 to 1951, there was a cholera pandemic and many people were buried immediately to control the spread of the disease, so it's thought that in some cases, the dying may have been buried alive.
Alright, next up we have the Silent Twins, also known as June and Jennifer Gibbons. Born in the Caribbean and raised in the United Kingdom, the girls lived a relatively normal life. Kind of, although they were bullied profusely in school. Eventually, the girls retreated into one another and they started speaking in a language only the two of them could understand, and they often mirrored each other's actions too. Any attempts to separate the twins were short-lived, as when they were apart, they would become entirely withdrawn from society as a whole. But as they grew, playing turned into substance and reading and writing became theft and arson, which landed them an indefinite stay at the Broadmoor Mental Hospital. Before their confinement in the hospital, June and Jennifer made a pact. If one died, the other must begin speaking and live a normal life. And so, in March of 1993, Jennifer made the ultimate sacrifice for her sister. She died, inexplicably, lying on her sister's lap with her eyes open, almost as though she had willed it to be. June would go on to live independently and happily, embraced by her community. She shared that when her sister died, she felt as though she had been washed free of the sins the two shared together. It was the feeling of ultimate freedom.
Alright, imagine if you will that you're walking down the street and you see someone with an unnaturally wide grin plastered across their face. You can't shake off this uneasy feeling. The smile doesn't seem joyful, it seems pained. In Japan, there's this cultural norm where women in the service industry are expected to smile constantly. It's practically a job requirement. This constant demand to smile can sometimes lead to what's known as smile mask syndrome. Imagine being in a job where you have to smile for hours on end, regardless of how you truly feel inside. This continuous act of putting on a happy face can take a toll on a person's mental and physical health. Makoto Natsume, a psychologist, observed that a lot of his female patients were suffering from depression because they felt compelled to suppress their real emotions and wear this artificial smile day in and day out. But it's not just a mental strain that smile mask syndrome brings. Prolonged smiling can lead to muscle aches and headaches, similar to symptoms of repetitive strain injury, and in rare cases, it's said, it can even lead to an inability to stop smiling.
Moving on to the Hinterkaifeck Killings, which are to this day unsolved and incredibly perplexing. Furthermore, they are considered to be some of the most gruesome modern-day killings. On March 31st of 1992, 6 family members living on a small farm in Hinterkaifeck, Germany, were killed one by one. It appears as though that evening, after their new maid had left for the night, 4 members of the family were lured into the barn. The perpetrators used a mattock, which is like a super sharp axe, to deliver blows to each family member's head. Once they were satisfied that the 4 were dead, the perpetrators piled them up in the barn and entered the home to finish off the rest of the family. The perpetrators then spent the next 3 days living in the home with the decaying bodies of their victims, eating their food, and even feeding and caring for the animals on the property. When police finally discovered what had happened, the farm was empty except for the deceased, and the animals, of course. An investigation was opened but went nowhere due to lack of evidence. The only shred of a clue police had was that in the days leading up to the killings, the family and their former maid, who had quit for this exact reason, had reported hearing strange noises coming from inside the attic. So if you hear strange noises coming from inside your attic, do not let it pass. Do something about it.
Alright, next up we have the Danny Casolaro case. Now, it would make a lot of sense that there could be powerful people who'd want to cover this case up, because the whole case has to do with a man allegedly being killed for investigating a cabal of very powerful people. Danny Casolaro was a journalist who had started working on a case in 1990 involving a legal software company called Inslaw. They'd claimed that their software was being used illegally by intelligence agencies they hadn't been partnered with. Well, this led Casolaro down this long, winding road that just kept getting deeper and deeper until he started piecing together this massive conspiracy, which he called the Octopus, a group of powerful, corrupt politicians, law enforcement agents, and criminals who he believed were pulling the strings behind some of the worst scandals of the 80s. And then Casolaro started receiving phone calls, some from voices he didn't recognize, telling him he was going too far and that he needed to stop or else. Casolaro was found dead in a hotel room on August 10th of 1991. He had a total of 12 slash wounds on his wrists. Yeah, they were so deep that there's no way he'd be able to hold a blade with one hand after cutting so deeply and then start hacking at the other side. It was immediately ruled that Casolaro had taken his own life, but his family, as well as many people who hear the details of this case, firmly believe that a group of individuals felt the need to silence him.
Next up, we have the horrors of Clinton Road. So there's a few things about Clinton Road, New Jersey that really stand out. One being the ghost of a young man who is said to appear anytime someone places a quarter in the middle of the road or on the bridge of the road that runs over Clinton Brook, aka Dead Man's Curve. At midnight, the ghost of the young man is said to return the coin, but if you're caught looking over the bridge at that time, you will be pushed into the water and he will attempt to drown you. Along with the ghost man, there is also a ghost truck that is said to haunt the road, well, two actually. Their headlights are said to appear out of thin air and chase drivers off the road before disappearing into the night. Also said to be inhabited by many strange creatures such as an albino wolf dog and hybrid monkeys, which many believe came to be as a result of rituals that were performed by druids near the road. If that's not enough for you, a frozen body was also found off of the side of the road, and it was most likely frozen so that police couldn't determine time of death. But they did believe it was the work of a mob hitman named Richard Kuklinski, aka the IceMan. When Kuklinski was convicted, he was charged for 5 killings, but it was later revealed that he was responsible for over 200 deaths. Mob life.
This next story has to do with MI6. MI6 is basically the CIA of the UK. So, you're just a regular guy. It's 2009, you're a delivery driver from the UK, looking to buy a camera for your upcoming holiday to the US. You hop onto eBay and you find a steal, a Nikon digital camera for 17 quid. It's about 20 bucks US. You go on your trip, snap some photos, nothing out of the ordinary, but when you get back home and try to transfer the images onto your computer, it's 2009, remember, you see something unexpected. It looks like the memory card hadn't been wiped clean by the previous owner. Mixed in with your vacation snapshots are images of suspected violent revolutionaries and weapons like rocket launchers and seized missiles. Turns out, you've stumbled upon the camera of an MI6 agent. Now, you're not sure what to do. You didn't sign up for this. You're just a delivery guy. You're not James Bond. But you do what any responsible citizen would do. You contact the police. Special branch officers show up at your doorstep. They retrieve the camera, and then they start asking you questions, and they end up coming back 5 times, grilling you about what you saw on the camera. Suddenly, you found yourself in a real-life spy drama. Well, all this really did happen. The man's name, understandably, was never released to the public.
Moving right along to the mystery of Betty and Barney Hill. In this case, I'm assuming that the they that want to restrict you from visiting this particular Wikipedia page would most likely be the government. Why? Because on September 19th of 1961, the pair were abducted by aliens while driving in rural New Hampshire. Betty looked up into the sky and saw a massive bright light. She told Barney to stop the car so that she could get a better look. He did, and she pulled out her binoculars. What she saw was a massive, oddly shaped craft with colorful lights soaring through the air. Barney took a look too, and while at first he thought it was an airplane, his opinion quickly changed when the spacecraft suddenly began advancing towards the pair. When it got close, Barney could clearly see 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship, which eventually opened its doors no more than 50 to 80 feet away from the couple, who were instructed not to move, but rather to just keep looking forward towards the ship, and then nothing. No memories. Betty and Barney said that they tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on the drive home, but after hearing buzzing noises, their memories became fragmented. In the days after the incident, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circle scratches on the trunk of his car, which, when he held his compass up next to them, caused it to freak out.
Alright, next up we have the infamous disturbing phone call made to Coast AM. So this is a conspiratorial, kind of paranormal radio show, a lot of alien stuff, Area 51 talk, that sort of thing. Now the wiki page itself may not be that creepy, but it may lead you down some creepy avenues. So take this phone call from 1997, for example. A guy called in frantically, talking about how he was a former employee of Area 51. Then he started disclosing supposedly sensitive information about their contact with alien beings that had been infiltrating the military and the government. Take a listen.
Of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now aren't.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out.
So then the man starts to cry before the radio station's transmission was cut off.
And to finish us off today, we have the incredibly freakish Carl Tanzler, and I can say that because he was. Don't believe me? Listen up. Tanzler was a doctor during the 1930s, and despite having a wife and kids, he fell in love with one of his patients, Elena Milagro de Hoyos, who had a husband and kids. Good news, there's only one freak in this story because as far as I know, Elena wasn't down. But after she passed from tuberculosis, I guess she really didn't have a choice. After Elena passed, Tanzler paid for her funeral and even commissioned an above-ground mausoleum for her, which he would visit almost every night. Until one night, when he snuck into the cemetery, dug up her grave, and brought Elena's corpse back to his home. When he got there, he reattached her bones with piano wire and fitted her face with glass eyes and her head with a wig he made from hair that he had previously obtained from her mother, somehow. He filled her corpse with rags so that it would hold its form, and as her skin decomposed, he replaced it with silk cloths covered in wax. Tanzler slept with Elena's corpse every night and even partook in adult activities until his freakishness was discovered and he was arrested for decimating the poor woman's grave. But he didn't serve time because by then the statute of limitations had passed. Elena's body was displayed in a funeral home and viewed by almost 8,000 people before returning to her grave to finally rest in peace.
It was like a little museum of creepy stuff.
Yeah, one that Elena's not in, thank God.
Yeah, really.
Something for everyone. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I have been your host, Hannah Thompson.
James.
Yes, we will see you
next time.
Yeah.